Hello, and welcome to Cosmic Dream Sanctuary. This is a presentation in the Finding Missing Time series. This presentation is on quantum physics, missing time, and hypnosis as an observer effect. I'm Daniel Rekshan, and I hold a bachelor's degree in liberal arts from St. John's College, a master's degree in East-West psychology from the California Institute of Integral Studies, a certificate in hypnotherapy and the depth hypnosis, and a certificate in Beyond Quantum Healing. I'm also ordained in the Universal Life Church, and I have 1 year of coursework in physics at Michigan Technological University. So the overview of this presentation is I'm going to present the relevant quantum physics as a metaphor for hypnosis and the missing time experience. I'm also going to talk about macroscopic quantum phenomena such as the mandala effect and look at missing time within that context. I'm also going to talk about new ways of knowing and how do we relate to these very strange and bizarre effects of quantum physics that we may be experiencing in the highly strange extraterrestrial or UFO, UAP contact phenomenon. So why is this important? Well, it turns out that our thoughts, actions, and observations may have ontological significance. So thinking about things, observing systems may actually have ontological effects and significance, like the double slit light experiment, where we see the collapse of waveform probabilities into a very particular expression. It's either or instead of maybe all sort of thing. So that's what we're doing perhaps when we are relating to missing time with the observational processes of hypnosis. So that's why it's important. Also, the fixation on objective truth, aka the reliving of memories, is contrary to the mythic narratives and may disrupt actually the healing, insight, and transformation missing time experiences might be seeking to generate. So we understand that the missing time experience in itself may be something like a dream and therefore might lead to healing, insight, and transformation. It also might move forward story-based activities like life in a way that's similar to like oracle or prophecy type interventions in story and narrative. And therefore the fixation on objective truth, the saying this is what happened or this didn't happen, let's explore this, like that sort of investigator, the objective investigator mindset actually may be detrimental to processes of healing and integration that our dreams at least yearn for. And so we'll explore that a little bit in the context of quantum physics here. Finally, this is an important investigation because hypnosis regarding missing time might not only generate false memories, so more than false memories, it may actually generate real experiences with historic and ontological significance. So we've been all afraid of leading questions as diverting us from this historic understanding of what happened in the missing time experience. I'm saying that we can't get away from leading questions. We are dealing with something psionic in nature, that the effect is not happening just by way of what we think is happening in terms of memory regression, but perhaps the hypnotist is lending a field of observation and collapsing possibilities based on that observational field. And in that way, their experience is relevant in a non-dual way, and in some way, shape, or form may actually create these ontological events. For instance, we have a plethora of stories arising out of the hypnosis on missing time phenomena related to genetic harvest. I'm saying that not only we might be causing memories to arise in a false way, I'm saying that these false memories may actually then blend into real experience, and they may actually collapse or bring that sense of imagination into being through a similar way that the collapse of the light from waveform probability to a particular expression collapses that sense of possibility and shifts an ontology. So I'm offering a new hypothesis about missing time. I'm saying missing time is like a quantum state. So we will be using the metaphor of the wave-particle duality, which I'll explain shortly. But in this case, the consciousness in the body within space-time is like a particle. Consciousness in the missing time experience is like a wave. So the shift between the two involves quantum effects. Right. So the understanding here is that perhaps in missing time experiences, the experience happens in a transcendent realm outside of the four-dimensional space-time manifold. So the four-dimensional space-time manifold is the three dimensions of space-time, space, and the one dimension of historical time. So then we have a 4D manifold. That's how we think about things. That's our Cartesian space. We can have coordinates, that sort of thing. I'm saying missing time happens outside of it, or perhaps it does, in a way that dream happens in dream time, not space-time. So in that way, these memories, these experiences of missing time may or may not be encoded within physical memory. They may or may not happen in the brain, and the occurrences of consciousness may or may not be encoded within the brain itself. And therefore, it may be something other than memory enhancement. So I'm saying my hypothesis here is that hypnosis is the induction of a dream state. Dreams are psionic in nature in some way, shape, or form, and some dreams bring memory. What happens here in the hypnosis state, I'm saying in the context of quantum physics, is we are generating a field of observation that causes the wave-like potentials of the transcendent realm. So this dream-like, is it this, is it that, is blurred between these different polarities of experience. I'm saying hypnosis collapses that down into a very particular experience. And I mean, even in my experience as a hypnotist, I often will go through non-leading questions, which is, what are you seeing? Is it light or dark? Is there a sense of motion or stillness? And I go through the categories of perception, exploring where on the spectrum of these polarities the experience lies. I'm saying that is collapsing of a waveform possibility of dream space, of missing time, into a very real, definite expression of meaning. And so in that way, there may be some experience of observer effect, of ontological expression of the observation of the hypnotist and the hypnotee in this non-dual event. So let's get into the double slit light experiment. What are we even talking about in terms of quantum? So quantum comes from the Latin quantum, how much. And in terms of what we are talking about, we use in physics the term quanta, which is the infinitesimal measurement of something. Generally the case is light we're talking about, so these are particles of light. These are quanta of light. How do they behave? Well, some people think particles, some people thought wave. Turns out it's both. And how do we know that? Well, we do an experiment called the double slit light experiment that reveals the quantum effects, the quantum observer effects. And so I'll just briefly describe this. So you take a coherent light source, you take a sheet that has two parallel slits in it, and you shine that light through the slits, and the light hits on a screen. And so what you might expect is there's like a pattern, right? Like what would you expect in the interference pattern? So that's the setup, is there's a light, goes through two slits, it arrives at a screen that records its what happens in the experiment. And then there's also a detector that figures out which of the slits the light actually goes through. So the outcome of this experiments are really interesting. So if the slits, if which electron or which light goes through which slit is not observed, then we see a wave-like interference pattern on the sensor, on the screen. And the interference pattern happens only because of waves. So this happens when you have constructive or destructive interference patterns of waves. And You can see those in everyday effects if you take like a piece of metal, put it on a speaker, and then put sand on that speaker. It vibrates, and then there's constructive and destructive patterns of that wave, which is the sound coming through the speaker, coming through the sand. In the case of this experiment, we have interference patterns in a banding of light. It's light and dark, in the way that is predictable based on like waves going through both of these slits. So if we don't know which slit, and we can send these things one at a time, one photon at a time. If we don't know which slit it goes through, the photons over time, like after many, many of them are sent through one at a time, we don't know. They create a wave-like interference pattern, so light and dark patterns, in the way that's expecting that there are two waves. So the conclusion here is that the wave sent one at a time is actually interacting with its quantum possible neighbor, a parallel reality version of itself. So it's 50% probability to go through one or the other. It's happening in both and creating an interference pattern that makes it look like it's happening in both. But if you observe which slit it goes through, then it collapses that waveform probability into a particular experience. So this is now moving from an analog experience of reality to a digital experience of reality. That's what it reveals through the effect of consciousness. So the conclusions here is that observation collapses waves of probability into definite particles. And so we see that at a microscopic sort of quantum level, right? So I'm saying in this metaphor, the missing time experience itself is something like that waveform probability. We're dealing with parallel realities. We're dealing with something might have happened. We don't know what. There's a lot of potential there. The hypnosis experience is actually, or the remembrance experience, is adding observation to the system. And the so-called recovered memory is like a particle expression of that multiple potentialities. So we're collapsing waveform probabilities into particular expressions and definite, discrete, digital expressions of what might have happened. So in that way, we see that the observation perhaps causes ontological effects. In that way, we might expect that the observation of that system, especially if that system deals with the extraordinary physics and the exotic psychological experiences of contact, right? If it deals with those things, if it's dealing with psychic time travelers and strange spacecraft, which I think it is, then what is happening there? They are behaving differently in that transcendent realm based on the observation in the future from this point of view. It's very strange, but that's the metaphor, that's the understanding. So let's get into another thing that's really interesting with quantum physics. This is entanglement and action at a distance. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. So what's happening basically is that particles appear to share quantum state data. So this is like spin, this is like different configurations of their quantum properties. And then state, so you can take these particles that were once together, kind of entwined in this quantum way, separate them, perform an action on one, perform an action on another. They communicate their data, and the data is at least shared, we know this, upon measurement of the system. And so these experiments have verified to communicate data 10 times the interval of, they said this is really strange, it's not 10 times the speed of light, or faster than the speed of light, is 10,000 times quicker interval of time associated with a transfer of or measurement of these states. So that's really important to know, that it violates our sense of what is possible in the world. It is paradoxical to relativistic and Newtonian physics. So the conclusion here is that the universe is at least respondent to consciousness in the form of measurement, and it is transcendently connected to source, meaning that at some level, the universe, through the Big Bang or whatever, is entangled with itself. That's why we can see non-local psi phenomena, why we can have telepathy happen, because there's some level of entanglement that is happening at a microscopic and macroscopic level between everything all at once. This is the understanding that perhaps we're in a singularity or something like that. But these effects show that at least, right, like at least there is a transcendent realm that connects all things. And that realm is consciousness. That's really important to acknowledge. It's consciousness. We know it's consciousness because of measurements that are like when consciousness enters into the system, we can tell. It's not just you can have a measurement. If nobody looks at the data, it's not actual consciousness. And therefore, you can have experiments based on that principle. Anyway, so let's talk about quantum experiences. So we've been talking abstractly kind of at the quantum level, this particle level. But what about in our everyday life? So I'm saying that there are effects that we can see. One effect that we see in everyday life and actually in cultures is our experience around dream sharing and sharing stories. So there's some level of observer effect happening there. I wrote a paper in grad school on the certain practices of dream sharing, particularly around precognitive dream sharing. So if you have a precognitive dream, it's a prophetic dream, something bad is going to happen or something good is going to happen. Depending on your culture, you might take action and you might speak it aloud so that you take away the power of the dream to manifest. Or you might not speak it aloud, afraid that it'll manifest more. And it really depends on culture, and there are contradictory behaviors across cultures, except for when it's internally consistent with an observer effect and expectation. So there is some level of ontological significance involved with observing and relating to these stories by way of consciousness, right? So you can experiment that if you're curious, incubate a precognitive dream and explore what that feels like in your life. And another quantum experience in macroscopic life might be psi phenomena. So a characteristic of the psi phenomena of the parapsychology stuff, extrasensory perception, telepathy, is spooky action at a distance. So the action at a distance comes because we know it's a non-local experience in consciousness happening that involves, likely it could involve speeds faster than light. We'd have to do, I think, more experimentation on that, but it seems to be non-local in nature. And it does actually involve observation effects. So one of the experiences we have with repeatable psi tests and telepathy tests is that in the three-dimensional kind of consensus reality science experiments, we see an effect of psi that is slightly yet significantly more than chance. But it won't actually produce an undeniable experience of oh, this is psi, this is how it works. It's always slightly better than chance. There's always a signal there, and it feels almost intelligent. It feels almost as if it's communicating with us. The next domain that I want to talk about is the high strangeness of ET contact. So oftentimes there is a high strangeness factor. So this is bizarre experiences, psychic experiences. And Jacques Vallée, in his 6-layer analysis of UAP phenomena in the 2nd layer, describes anti-physical effects. And these things are like bilocation. These things are contraction of space-time, dilation of space-time. They're telepathic experiences. They're strange because they exhibit a lot of these quantum behaviors. And then there's observer effects I want to call out again in kind of a psi context, but when we add a collective field together, when we add energy to these experiences where we create a set and setting very much like a psychedelic journey, that it might be understood to be actually a narrative journey, a journey within this realm of story. When we set up those situations, we can see that these psi phenomena are that much more effective, right? So we've got group seances, we've got spoon bending experiences, we've got CE5 experience. If you believe and you add energy to this situation, something seems to happen. And I know it doesn't address the skeptics in the room, but it's actually an effect that practitioners see and feel. So it's really important to know. I want to bring forward the mutual enactment hypothesis and talk a little bit about that. This is from a paper, Our Wild Cosmos, by Sean Esborn-Hargens, who looks at all of the different kind of contact phenomena, all of the strange different experiences, and looks to create an integral and holistic framework for understanding these things. He lists about 10 different hypotheses associated with contact phenomena, like, it's secret space program, it's time travelers from the future, it's ultradimensionals, it's intradimensionals, it's extraterrestrial, it's celestials, whatever, right? So, and this hypothesis says it's all of them acting together. And so I'll read this paragraph from his paper. The mutual enactment hypothesis. Non-human intelligences are one of 5 major kinds of beings that contribute in mutually enacting ways to each other in the manifestations of the phenomena, i.e. UFO, anomalous, and paranormal experiences. All five kinds of beings, humans, non-human intelligences, earthlights, and thought forms and archetypes, are influenced in numerous ways by electromagnetic energies. These 5 kinds of beings exist within an ontological matrix that includes at least 3 distinct axes and spectrums, stations where they originate and where are they located, their sovereignty, how much free will do they have, and their substance, what type of matter or energy are their bodies made out of. A being's location on all 3 spectrums determines its ontological status. This hypothesis is the result of a sustained meta-analysis of at least 10 hypotheses and provides a potential integration of the major insights and distinctions of each of them. So in this case, it gives us a framework to say, hey, there is multiple spectrums of beingness, from subjective to objective, let's say, from within me to outside of me, that sort of thing. And it really does see that there is a communication between all different aspects situated within this matrix, so that my observer effect, which is an objective experience when I work with a client in hypnosis, can have an ontological impact on something that's real, but within consciousness for them, that then in turn influences something by way of psychic connection with time travelers, time traveling psychic people in spacecraft, or by interaction with earthlights or some other manifestation of the phenomena. So it gives this wide range of possibility to see how much motion there is. And so in some ways we are when we work with hypnosis, we are collapsing certain things that happen from potentiality to a status in this ontological matrix. So let's talk about the quantum missing time experience and how the quantum metaphor applies to missing time. So missing time, as we've talked about, is often associated with UFO and UAP sightings. It's actually very present in everyday life in the experience of sleep and dream. Every night we have something like missing time unless we engage in the mindful practices of lucid dreaming, which we'll talk about in another paper. But the missing time experience here, we don't know it happens in historic space-time. And actually, if we see the behavior and the quantum behavior of these ships that phase in and out, we might even assume that they exist or have some level of quantum control, phasing in and out, whatever, by locations, that sort of thing. So we might assume that it exists in this kind of quantum state. So we may be shifting from particle to wave in the missing time experience. And the gaps in the time actually might be like gaps in the interference pattern of that double slit light experiment, right? So there might be gaps in the time because parallel versions of us are like hitting up against one another, right? So direct possible direct experience of source consciousness happens via entanglement and all that is. So that's really like when we're in that state, we might be connected in many, many ways to many of these things in this ontological matrix that might include source, that might include everything that exists within the singularity of this universe and multiverse. And that's a really vast thing to contemplate. The memory gap may happen because the body and mind, etc., may not actually exist in Newtonian space as being in itself. So that's a little, it's a really kind of abstract way to say we might the body, the mind might actually phase into a deeper reality or a different reality or a waveform expression of reality, and then phase back into particular experience upon coming back from the missing time experience. And therefore, right, we might see that missing time might not be repressed memory at all, but some way of conceptualizing within the discrete experience of the egoic persona mind that really likes polarity and distinction, which is not present in the quantum state. So it's representing this quantum wave-like potentiality within the context of this 3D consensus reality persona world that we live in together. So what there are implications for the hypnosis practice, right? So for the hypnosis practice, which is a phenomenon in itself in relation to this missing time phenomena, people seek out hypnotists even though it is scientifically proven that memory enhancement is a questionable practice, let's say. So in this hypothesis, the mindfulness of the hypnotist is somehow contributes to an observer effect. The hypnosis operates via that observer effect. So we're saying, hey, there's something that happened in this waveform possibility. I don't know what it is. Rather than having a memory enhancement experience to figure that out, it collapses that possibility into something discrete that can then be remembered. A thing I often like to think about, particularly in connection with the case that I work with, that worked with me actually, the Dan Berg case, it seems to involve people in spacecraft, right, the Apunians, who are psychic time travelers, right? So they're psychic time travelers. They can travel backwards and forwards in time. They can send messages through automatic writing, through multiple sources that aren't connected. They have an example, or they seem to be examples of embodied psionic capacities, and they go backwards and forwards in time. They're time travelers in some way. They're working with timelines, they say. So the thing I often think about is, what does regression mean when we regress back to a state of interaction with psychic time travelers? I can tell you it's likely not memory. It's likely not memory. It's likely telepathic communion. Again, just saying, hypnosis does not and cannot directly deal with memories. Rather, in this case, and understanding, hypnosis induces a dream state of consciousness, like that of the quantum state. It utilizes the observer principle. Dreams are psionic in nature. They mediate our human and non-human world, and they have quantum and paranormal effects, right? So that's really important to know. In this hypothesis here, that missing time may actually be a psionic event. Missing time hypnosis is a non-dual event that is psionic in nature, meaning it is telepathic, it involves non-local phenomena, and it may have ontological significance backwards and forwards in time and along paralleled realities. So that's the conclusion of this hypothesis, right? So couple interesting implications here, right? And I just need to spell this out once again, is hypnosis does not deal with historic facts, historic events via memory. So people often fear leading questions and saying, oh, the hypnotist did this leading question. They led questions and generated false memories. I say, yes, false memory syndrome is a thing when we're talking about historic events, right? But it's we might not actually have memories of the missing time event, right? That's really important to know. The other thing important to know in context of this discussion of the fear of leading questions is that most communication actually happens in a nonverbal way. So even if you're not speaking aloud your leading questions, your heart actually is generating a field of entrainment, right? So that's why in my review of the evidence, I say, right, the 266 cases that I have counted of missing time regression hypnosis that have informed our abduction experiences are actually expressions of perhaps 10 or so different hypnotists. So our sample size goes from 200 or 300 or 500 to about 10 hypnotists practicing in this field, because they generate a field of observation that is unique to them and contributes one side of this to this non-dual event, which is called the missing time regression. That's one thing I want to call out. So the next step in terms of that fear of misleading questions, right, is like hypnosis might actually not just create false memories, but create real memories of events that were not ontologically significant in the way of history until the regression hypnosis took place. So I'm saying that in terms of linear time, you have a missing time experience that represents a possibility, potentiality, waveforms. There's parallel realities in there. You have an objective historic event, which is missing time regression, that collapses the potential from possibility to actuality. Yes, you're saying, yes, this actually happened. This is what happened to me. So I'm saying that collapse of possibility then shifts the ontological status of what those UFO occupants, what the missing time experience happened. So it goes backwards in time and it shifts the ontological relationship you have to potential time-traveling psychic beings that have manifest capacity and control over this UAP phenomena. So that's just weird, but that is one of the things that might actually be happening in terms of missing time hypnosis, is that the aggressive and negative bent of hypnotists like Hopkins or David Jacobs might actually in some way be objectively causing, by way of this sort of infinity loop paradox, it might actually be causing the events to unfold in such a negative, aggressive way. So I'm saying that Hopkins and Jacobs may have had unresolved issues. And same thing with Benjamin. Dr. Benjamin in the Hill case, he came from World War II. So there's unresolved aggressive trauma, of war trauma, built into the exploration of the UFO phenomena. I'm saying that those people who were wounded in the trauma of war, in this Cold War and that sort of thing, those hypnotists created a field of observation that was inherently wounded and bent towards this light-dark duality, the victim-victimizer, that sort of thing. And they created experiences, and it shifted the potential from that missing time experience to be positive or negative, right? It might be joyful, it might not. They might be telepathic, it might not. They might have understanding, they might not. And they shifted those possibilities and collapsed those possibilities to the way that the hypnotist could understand. And that actually created the historic event, not just the potential of the event, but the historic event, which is then remembered during the regression session. So it's a very bizarre kind of time travel loop, but I'm saying that actually may be the case. There's nothing we can do about it except for be honest about it and relate to it in a way of integrity. And I say some of that has to do with stating your worldview. Like, I personally believe that contact with these non-human intelligences will lead to greater peace, love, and unity consciousness here and now on Earth, and will lead to a greater embodiment of a stewardship mentality between us as humans and the Earth. And so it'll shift us from objectifying the Earth and each other to helping us realize that we are an infinite kind of expression of the possibilities of source consciousness. And that's a really beautiful thing. But I'll be clear about that we are on a non-dual co-participatory journey within the unknown. I don't say that I'll give you memories back. That's not something I can promise. I can say I'll show up with a field of mindful observation and allow this thing to unfold, and that may actually have ontological significance. So if you're interested in this, just know I am putting together a book on this, primarily because I believe this is the most important issue in terms of epistemology, hypnosis practice, dreaming, and science. It's this connection between the quantum physics and the everyday world that we experience through missing time phenomena that are not just associated with UFOs and UAPs, but also associated with extraordinary and exotic dream experiences. So in the book, I'll be covering this theory and hypothesis. I'll cover the evidence for missing time. I have interviews with experts in the field, a storyteller, a researcher, and a hypnotist, asking them about their wisdom in terms of relating to extraordinary stories. I have practice in terms of how to practice hypnosis according to this theory. And I also have case studies. I have about 14 I want to present. I'm working with people to bring those forward. I'll also offer conclusions in terms of epistemology, how we can work with hypnosis as a way of knowledge, ethics, considering the ethics involved with this, primarily because of the strange implications, as well as etiquette about how we speak about our phenomenological experiences, our phenomenal experiences. And finally, I'll have a bibliography and references for you to actually engage in your own inquiry with the same material that I have. So if you want to get in touch, if you are curious about missing time, have missing time, you have documentation you want to share, you want to contribute theory, history, or review chapters, or just want to explore hypnosis, please do email me at daniel@cosmicdreamsanctuary.org. And with that, thank you for being here. Thank you for exploring the strange world of quantum physics and how it might apply to your life by way of observing your dreams or observing your missing time experiences. Thank you for allowing your mind to expand, to explore some of the paradoxes, the time traveler infinity knot paradox. If we do something now and it impacts time travelers and they go back in time, how does that this sort of science fiction experience? Thank you for really actually considering that level of time travel paradox is inherent within the system of reality that we exist in. Thank you for the courage of entering into experience and exploration and inquiry without actually knowing anything about it and existing somewhere within this ontological matrix that we don't even know where we're at in, quite honestly. And thank you for exploring that way. It is a vulnerable and courageous thing to do. And it actually sets you in journey space with the universe itself. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for considering the notion that missing time might not be the repression of traumatic memories. Thank you for considering that it actually may be something else. Thank you for imagining with me like what happens in the missing time hypnosis regression experience. And thank you for, I know you're probably attached to some notions as to what happens in the abduction experience, whether they're false, whether they're real, whether you're an abductee, whether you're not. You're likely attached to one particular stance or orientation to this matrix of possibility. Just know that we're loosening up that a little bit. We're letting go of our attachments to these very particular definite things and moving into this state of being, right? This is the practice of mindfulness, actually. We're being present with our experience moment to moment in a non-judgmental way. We're not making judgments about it. And judgment is the process of establishing orientation, a discrete, definite, is it this or that? Non-judgment says, hey, it can be both. So perhaps that through the practice of mindfulness and through actual mindful presence in the hypnosis experience, we can honor the quantum possibilities of what happened in the missing time experience, use that in a way to create the best world possible for us. And this earth that you see here in this image of Earthrise really does need you to do this work. It really does need you to do this work. If there's a capacity for all of us to shift the possibility or possible timelines of us going forward to climate collapse and societal collapse and us going into a golden age, a renaissance of science based upon this consciousness, a renaissance of our society. Let's all learn a little bit about quantum physics. Let's all approach our discomfort about missing time experience, which we all experience every single night. Let's explore that and see how we can collapse those possibilities into actual benefit for this world and this planet, because that's absolutely needed. Thank you for doing that work. And I just pray that your experience can help embody your own destiny, your own connection with Source, your own experience of love and connection with the entire cosmos. Once again, thank you.